Today we are ranking the albums of As I Lay Dying up to Through Storms Ahead, but we're starting at the beginning with Beneath the Encasing of Ashes in 2001. An album that not as many people talk about in comparison to their breakout album, which was the next one, but you can already hear a lot of their sound developing just in a more raw and unprocessed form. In that way, it feels very much like an early demo. In fact, much like Killswitch Engage's self-titled debut, there are early versions of some of their songs that show up on the next one. As far as their discography goes, it's good, but it's their weakest as a whole in my eyes, but I am kicking myself a little bit when I talk about it because I actually had all of their CDs, including an early pressing of this one, but traded it like a dummy. Regardless, gonna put this one at OK tier. As always, comment below if you feel differently. That brings us to Frail Words Collapse in 2003. The album that truly put their name on the map and was a big record for me getting into more and more different forms of metal. I remember going to Hot Topic, as we often did in our teenage years, and this is how I used to get and often discover albums back in the day. Like, they had that shelf with 9 or so albums with the headphones where you could sit there and listen to the new releases. Anyways, I listened to this and was absolutely floored, but then they also had Bleeding Through's breakout album, This Is Love, This Is Murderous, and I had to choose between the two of them because I only had enough money for one. You've got that incredible opening riff from 94 Hours that myself and I'm sure hundreds of others were inspired to learn, all of that Gothenburg-inspired guitar work, same goes for Distance is Darkness, and of course, Forever. I love the almost insect-sounding guitars on 1,000 Steps as well. Now, in spite of all that, and this being among my favorite early 2000s metalcore albums, it feels a little stripped back in comparison to their later works, and I think that their songwriting performances only improve from here, so I wouldn't put it at the top in spite of its special place in my heart. I'm gonna put it at great tier. They follow that up with Shadows Are Security in 2005. Controversial album here for the channel, as it's another one of those fan favorites that I just don't care much for. In fact, I was disappointed hearing this for the first time coming off of the last one. Even so, it's got some great cuts on it, namely Confined, which is one of their best singles and probably beats out anything on Frail Words, if I'm being honest. Killer build-up at the beginning, and you can hear the tightening up of the songwriting. Meaning in a Tragedy is also a very good opener. Really dig Empty Hearts and Through Struggle. It's not that it's bad, I just find it to be a little bit overrated and overshadowing some of their albums that followed, no pun intended. So I'm putting this one at good tier. Then we got An Ocean Between Us in 2007. Now, if Frail Words Collapse was my high school As I Lay Dying album, An Ocean Between Us was my college one. I still remember when I first picked it up on a carpool trip from the dorms to Target, of all places, back when you could actually get music like this there. I blasted it all the way home and countless times since. Every song in this album is basically a single, and I remember you could not avoid all of the music videos on Headbangers Ball. You've got that classic opening riff on Nothing Left, and then it just builds and builds into such a powerful listen. Major gym fuel, for sure. For me, this is when As I Lay Dying became a fully fleshed out, fully matured entity, and the vocals got so much stronger at this point too, with an almost deathier delivery and the infectious gang vocal moments. And then of course the riffs on this album are just undeniable. Love the title track, Within Destruction goes full thrash and groove metal with those guitar riffs, borders on Lamb of God with that one. Then there's the powerful and uplifting Forsaken with the big melodic intro and a chorus that still gives me chills. I also love that sudden transition to the chuggy parts with the lead over it. Another thrashy sounding one in Comfort Betrays, and also the highly motivating energy of The Sound of Truth and This Is Who We Are. This album never fails to pull me out of a bad mood and reset me thinking on what actually matters, so it is still going to perfection after all these years. And from here on, kind of like the Black Dahlia Murder, all of the albums are really great, and they kind of make the same album over and over again, but I just enjoy them so much. Next up is The Powerless Rise in 2010. Another crazy heavy opener in Beyond Our Suffering, followed by another all-time favorite in Anodyne C, massive sounding chorus and insanely fast riffing on the verses. Without Conclusion is another full speed ahead track, dangerous to listen to while driving, followed by more classic earworm metalcore hooks on Parallels. The Plague almost reaches death metal level heaviness with that growled vocal intro and feedback going into another deluge of awesome picking, while alternatively Anger and Apathy takes a slower approach with yet more melodies that worm their way into your brain. Condemned is another trademark classic. I could go on. Much like on the last one, pretty much every track on here could be a single. It's not quite as consistent with some slightly lesser tracks towards the end, but by lesser I mean like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10. But as far as like maxing out a 2 per tier in terms of my favorites, this one's also going to perfection. Then we got Awakened in 2012. Another album with just hit after hit after hit, more killer riffs, more awesome sing-alongs and gang vocals. Cauterize is a downright thrasher of an opener, followed strongly by another banger in A Greater Foundation. Also Defender and No Lungs to Breathe are also like top 10 tracks. More that I just can't get enough of with one of my favorite riffs of all time. The only song I don't necessarily care for is My Only Home, and there are some tracks here and there that aren't quite at the same level as the best ones, but it's still overall a guitar player's dream and a continuation of the songwriting trends that I loved from An Ocean Between Us. Putting this one at fantastic. Sadly, this was the end for some time, as Tim, who seemed to have everything, hired a hitman in an attempt to murder his estranged wife over issues related to custody of the children, from my understanding. Tim also stated that his steroid use may have had an effect on his thinking at the time, but regardless, it was a beyond terrible thing to do that fortunately did not come to be, as the hitman in question was an undercover cop, and rightly so, he ended up going to jail for this. For those reasons, I know some of this was enough to write the band off entirely, but given all the memories I have associated with their music, I'm of the perspective that once it hits my ears, it becomes mine. Plenty of art is created by flawed and sometimes even monstrous people, which is why these days I don't really worship artists, I just prefer to enjoy the art, and I also believe in second chances. Which brings us to their return with Shaped in Fire in 2019. The comeback album after Tim's release from prison, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't actually love it. With the full lineup back intact, it's almost as if they never left, with more career bests kicking this off in the very Shadows Are Security, but better Blinded, and also choruses that I can't help but sing along to. And the hits keep coming with Undertow, Gatekeeper, The Wreckage, and the explosive My Own Grave, which may be my favorite here overall. I actually found that stuck in my head the night before recording this. More high-octane arthritis-inducing speed and big atmosphere on Redefine. Not as in love with Torn Between, Take What's Left, or The Toll It Takes, but still very good. Another strong contender, I'm putting this one at fantastic. Before we get to the latest album, just a reminder to hit the like button if you're enjoying the video. It helps me out in the algorithm, as does commenting your own thoughts. These are just my opinions after all. And also consider subscribing for plenty more videos just like this. I do about twice a week, and I have over 1,000 on the channel at this point. But that brings us to Through Storms Ahead in 2024. Now, it's never a great sign when after the big comeback, almost the entire band quits, save for Tim and guitarist Phil Sagrasso. Okay, so I recorded this a few weeks ago, and since then, Phil and the entire new lineup have left the band. So do with that what you will. It seems pretty clear to me that Tim is very much squandering that second chance that I talked about earlier, but there you go. Still, this new lineup brings a strong opener in a Broken Reflection with riffing that actually reminds me a bit more of the classic sound of Shadows Are Security. In fact, many of these songs feel like they scaled back some of the heaviness of the previous albums in favor of something very explicitly 2000s metalcore. That said, We Are the Dead is definitely the heaviest track here, with Alex Terrible and Tom Barber guesting. Great track that grew on me, though I still feel like they could have done so much more vocally with that lineup. And speaking of the vocals, I'm on the fence about the new cleans. There are times where they work really well and others where they get a little bit too poppy for my taste and start to sound like a different band. But arguably my bigger critique is that there are fewer of those guitar hooks that just leap out and inject themselves directly into my brainstem. Where it used to feel like almost every song had that, here it's about 50-50 with standouts including my personal favorite Burden, gotta love that transition too. Also Whitewashed Tomb, Gears That Never Stop, the tapping part on Through Storms Ahead, and that pretty epic part starting around the middle of The Cave We Fear to Enter. Much of the rest is serviceable if a little recycled sounding, and I have to attribute at least some of that to the major loss of Nick Heapa. He was just such a foundational backbone to a lot of what this band brought and some of my favorite things that I loved in the past. But overall, I enjoy this record. Not nearly as consistently, still recommended, still among the better modern metalcore albums out there representing the roots of the genre, just not quite hitting the same bar that they have set for themselves. So, for that reason, I'm going to put this one at good tier. Y'all check out this playlist for more metalcore rankings, including the likes of Darkest Hour, Unearth, August Burns Red, Every Time I Die, and Norma Jean. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, consider becoming a channel member or a patron to get early access to videos, little extra emojis, and also just to support me directly. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.